Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this webinar in the run-up to the UCCon 2022-23. We have planned this webinar in order to apprise the members of the various skills which are required for the conduct of the scientific session, including the way they need to present, the responsibilities of the chairpersons, owning the communication skills. We have a star-studded faculty lineup today. It would be a very interesting session. With this, I would invite Dr. Ravindra Sabnis, President USI, to give his opening remarks. Over to you, Dr. Sabnis.
Thank you, Keshav. I think this is a very good idea, and we were just discussing that such type of meeting should be organized. I think the last was in Pune conference many years back. But I think this is the the program, or this is the course, or this is a webinar which should be organized very frequently, especially before the UCCon. Because often we think that chairing of the session, what is there? You just sit and you don't have to do anything. But there are so many responsibilities of the chairperson. How to present, how to make your slides, how to make your content very impressive. That's very important. And the way you present is how you can catch the audience, how you can make sure that what you want to convey to the audience is properly conveyed. So that communication skill through presentation is very important. So these are the aspects which one must learn. And these don't come automatically. And now you have ready-made platform, you have experts who are there to teach you, to train you. So I think everybody must take the advantage of it. Those who have logged in, I think they should listen to it very carefully. Those who have logged in also will appeal them that you please make sure that you at least go through this webinar before you present your paper in the UCCon, or before you moderate or chair the session. You must go through this. So with this remarks, and thanking all the panelists for their efforts, and Dr. Chawla to thought of such a nice, interesting session, I hand over again to Dr. Keshav.
Thank you, sir. Now I would invite the chairman of the Indian School of Urology, Dr. Arun Chawla, to take over and moderate the session. Over to you, Dr. Arun.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Keshav, and thank you, Dr. Sabnis. As both of them stated that this is meant for our run-up to the preparations for UCCon. And that's how those who have got the opportunity to be on the stage as a presenter or as a chairman, moderator, or a quiz master, I think this webinar is surely going to help to augment their preparation, fine-tune and complement their task of participating. With this, I thank our faculty, esteemed faculty, experienced faculty who have been doing this sort of sessions in the different annual conferences, in the zonal conferences. Dr. Nitin, Dr. Rajiv, Dr. Jnanendra Sharma, and Dr. Arvind. With this, we'll open our first session, which is based on our preparations of communication and presentation. I invite Dr. Rajiv for his opening talk on the art of presentation skills. I think Rajiv?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Chawla. Can you see my slides?
Yeah.
Yes, it is all audible.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, Dr. Chawla. Thank you, members of the USI, for asking us to do this once again. We've been doing these sessions quite regularly, actually. And the session that Dr. Sabnis mentioned was a session at UCCon in Pune. And that was the first time we had a hall where we couldn't find a seat for our audience. So we really enjoyed doing it. But we've been doing sessions like this at UCCon on a regular basis, some parts, not the entire thing. And we've also been doing these sessions standalone as a part of ISU Webinars for the last quite few years. The reason we repeatedly do this, even though it seems that we are repeating ourselves every time we do it, is because the audience is new. And even if the audience is the same, things change. So for example, what I will be talking about in the next 15 minutes or so is stuff which is now more relevant to your presentations as they will happen at a scientific conference. Presentations we make also depend upon what is our audience and what is the medium through which we are presenting. I'll give you some examples as we go along in this presentation. That if you are speaking to an audience which consists primarily of colleagues, or it's in a scientific meeting where you're presenting a free paper, an invited paper, the presentation style is very different from the presentation that you would make if you were delivering an oration, or if you were a senior person giving a talk to undergraduates or to students. Then your presentation and your slides would change. Similarly, it would change depending upon whether you're doing everything in a physical meeting where your audience is in front of you versus if you were doing it online. And this is something new to most of us. We've modified our style of slide making in the last 3 years over the pandemic. And the slides set is actually very different when you do it online. So I'll cover some of these issues in the next 15 minutes. The outline of my talk would be that first I will show you a little bit about how to prepare your presentation, which is focused on the slide content and the slide design. I'll also talk a little bit about web presentations and how they are different from the slides you would make from a physical presentation. And finally, I'll give you a little bit of a summary of what we've just said. Now, an important aspect to understand about this talk is that I am limiting myself to the content part of it. Whenever you deliver a talk, there are primarily two parts of a talk. First is the content and the second is the delivery. Both of them are equally important. However, you can not do one without the other. So I will restrict my presentation to preparing the content. Dr. Gyanendra Sharma, who has a talk right after mine, will focus on the presentation aspect of it. So I will talk specifically about preparing your slides or the content. And why do you need to know all this is important? Why should I waste my time? I've just got an abstract. I just have to go because my faculty has told give presentation, go make a presentation, come back. Why should I care? I'll give you a very strong reason why you must care. You see that golden egg in a pack of white eggs. The only way you can be the golden egg is if you do a good job. If you don't do a good job, you're just one among the very large number of white eggs. And in a country today where there are 300 to 400 urologists graduating every year, if all you want to do is be a white egg, don't come to the conference. If your objective is to learn, to stand out, to do a good job, and obviously not hit your own head with your thumb, target yourself to be the golden egg, and therefore you have to learn how to stand out. Once you've realized you want to make a presentation, you're not doing it just because you've got to get your TADA or your HOD has told you to do it, and you actually want to enjoy doing it, and you want to make an impression, the next important thing you must understand is that your audience really has no time for you. Time spans for audiences have progressively declined, and it today is probably less than half a minute. If you can't keep your audience interested in the first half minute, you've lost them for the remaining 6 or 7 minutes. Therefore, your slides and your presentation must be sharp. The next very important thing for you to remember is to respect your audience. So if your audience has given you 7 minutes, if your time is 7 minutes in a presentation, you cannot take 7 minutes and 5 seconds. It has to be 6 minutes and 50 seconds, not 7 minutes and 5 seconds. Therefore, understanding how to keep everything concise within the time span that you've been given and yet make an impact such that when people go away from a conference, if there are only 3 presentations they remember, one of them is yours, you need to learn how to do a good job about it. So what are the golden rules for doing this good job? The first golden rule, of course, is you have to be prepared. You can't just get up, make a slide presentation in the night and take it in the morning and say, I will do it. It won't work. You'll get your job done, you'll get a certificate and come back, but that's a wasteful effort. The other important thing is to understand, be aware of your audience. What do I mean by this? What I mean by this is remember who you're talking to. You're talking to a bunch of colleagues, probably residents just like you. You may very well be in the 3rd year. You may just have finished. You may be a young consultant. Most of the people are just like you. So if there is something you don't understand, they will not understand it either. Therefore, so let's take the example of, let's say you've done a thesis on fish analysis. Now, I guarantee to you that the bulk of you have no idea how a fish is done. Now, just because you've done a thesis and you now know what a fish is, it doesn't mean that anybody else in the hall, even a number of your faculty, would know what a fish is. Therefore, if you're not able to explain to them in the first 2 slides what a fish actually means, your slides are a waste. Therefore, you must make sure that you are understood in order to be appreciated. Therefore, be aware of your audience. Address the least well-read person, whosoever you think knows the least. Make sure he or she understands what you're saying. And the next thing is about what we call cue cards. Cue cards is a word that we take from presentations in the past, when people used to have these small little pieces of paper on which they would write small notes and give a speech. They would look at a card, it would have few points, you'd read those, and then go to the next one. So they would not actually read the entire speech from the cards, but the cards would have salient points which needed to be covered. And therefore, they would be called cue cards. They would cue the person to speak what needed to be spoken. That's what slides today should be. And I'll explain that a little more as we go down. So now some practical tips. This was philosophy. Now I'll talk about practical tips. How many slides should I make? Golden rule is don't make more than 1 slide per minute. Now, unfortunately, I know that's not practically possible. Many times we need to make a larger number of slides. And therefore, particularly when you're younger, when you have less experience in presenting, you may make up to 2 slides per minute. So the more senior, more accomplished you become, the fewer are the slides that you will make, because you really don't need to put everything on slides. You'll speak from experience and knowledge. But as you are younger, you can probably make 2 slides per minute, but avoid going anything more than that. Why do I say that? It's because if you have too many slides, you're simply rushing between slides, and nobody understands what you're saying on any one of them. The next important aspect is everything you put on the slide should be simple. Don't use difficult jargon. I explained that a little while ago with that fish experiment. If you didn't understand it, they won't understand it. So start from the very basics of your study, of your experiment, of your study design, and then move from the very basics to the more advanced. Whenever you have a new concept that you're explaining, so let's say there was a fish, let's say there was a randomized trial where you've done something new about randomization, there's a surgical technique which is different from the past, one concept on one slide. Don't put multiple concepts on the same slide. When you talk about the number of slides, always begin with the title slide in which you explain your topic and your name. Then there should be an outline slide which outlines what am I going to talk about, then the content, and then a summary slide. So what does this do? This basically puts your message across 3 times. In your introduction slide, in the content, and in the summary. So you've actually given your message 3 times. This reinforces the message that you're trying to give. So we used to call it, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them. So introduction, content, and summary. And always end with a thank you. Even if for nothing else, it will wake up anybody else who's sleeping, so they won't look surprised when your talk has ended. Now let's talk about slide in general. How do you design your slides? The first thing is, again, remember I'm talking very specifically about presentations of posters, podiums, free papers or prize papers in conferences. This concept may change when you're doing it at a different forum, but I'm focusing myself to scientific conferences where you're presenting your research. Use bullet points. You've seen what I've done here. All are bullet points. PowerPoint is a very powerful software. It gives you a lot of things called templates, basic designs, and this talk is not going to explain PowerPoint to you, but play around with PowerPoint, explore these things, and that helps you make uniformity in your slide. Another very important concept is never to put more than 7 words across, never more than 7 lines. This is a general statement because if it becomes smaller, the slide fonts become smaller and people can't read. Never use all capitals, and it should always be written flown text. Never write your entire speech. So if whatever you wish to say, if you have copy pasted it from somewhere and you're going to read from the slide, nobody's listening to you. If you know that there are 50 words, 70 words on the slide, and everybody wants to read because you're also reading from the slide, nobody's listening to you. They're simply reading as fast as you can read from the slide. So don't list your entire speech. And in order to shorten the content or decrease the content on your slides, things like a, and, the, these articles, words can be removed. You don't write full sentences. You just write the key points, just like cue cards. And of course, finally, the most important thing, spell check. Nothing is more irritating to an audience when the presenter can't even spell his own experiment correctly. So make sure you spell check. Now let's talk about fonts. Fonts are which, for example, Arial, Times New Roman. I think everybody is now facile with all these things. Always stick to one font if you can, uniformly throughout your slides. Also, be mindful of the character sizes. People tend to associate importance with the size of the font. So if your titles are in 32 and your next text is in 28, if on the next slide something is 32, they will give it as much importance as they gave the title in the previous slide. This is our natural brain reaction. Bigger fonts, more importance. Smaller fonts, less importance. And that is fine, but you must exploit it uniformly on your slides. If all the headings are 32, make them uniformly 32. If all text is 20, make it 20. If all the references are in 18, make them 18. So use the same text, same style, same scheme throughout. And PowerPoint allows you to do this by something called slide masters. So again, this is not a PowerPoint lecture, so I would advise you to explore this. And try and use the conference template if a conference template has been provided to you. For example, you'll see the UCCon logo on the top of my slides here. Try and use the logo that the conference providers have provided to you. A little bit about fonts. I know all of us try to be artistic and experimental, but don't do random stuff with your fonts. This is not an expression of the various types of playing around fonts. It's more an expression of science. Then a little bit about color schemes. The best color schemes is a contrasting color scheme, light on dark, dark on light. The basic principle used to be that if you're presenting in a dark room, then a light text on a dark background is preferred. If you're presenting in a brightly lit room, dark text on light background is preferred. But if you're not sure, and most of us aren't sure what kind of an environment we would get, then dark on light is a uniform that goes almost everywhere. Don't use too many colors. Although these days everybody is using LED backlit screens, but sometimes if you're using a projector, then the colors will fade out. So just because it looks very nice on your laptop doesn't mean it's going to look very nice on a projector. So don't use too many color schemes, and use colors very specifically to highlight specific things, but then try and use the same color for highlighting the same degree of importance on every slide. Don't use blue to highlight one and red to highlight another, when actually the importance is the same. A little bit more about color, but I'm going to skip this slide because I doubt anybody would now use it. But things like red on blue, blue on red, white on background of yellow on white, this is stuff nobody can read. So if you've been playing around with colors, remember the most important thing is that you must be read, you must be understood. So if you're stylish, but nobody can read your slide, it's a waste of an effort. So try and give decent amounts of contrast, so at least your slides stand out. So again, is this the perfect slide? There are so many errors on this slide. There is so much content on the first line that I'm going to be reading from it, and so are you. Therefore, you're not listening to me. There's a slight change in the font on the second line, which was unnecessary. There's a change in the font between the second and the third line. All of a sudden, something becomes in all caps. Now, even if you wish to emphasize, don't put it in all caps. Try and writing a paragraph in all caps and you'll make tons of mistakes. I mean, I'm sure some of you have seen those riddles which come in many of these WhatsApp forwards, where everything is written in caps and there are so many errors. You can still read it because you recognize the shapes and stuff, but you make too many mistakes if you do all caps. Don't randomly change colors. And again, an unnecessary animation. There was no reason for an animation to come onto the there's another animation. Totally random, makes no sense. So don't do stuff like this. When it comes to movies, the most common problem you see is that the movie doesn't play. Standard error, you say, I have put in a movie, It was running back in my home. It is running in my laptop, but it's not running in the conference venue. It's your problem. It's because you've used a movie format that is incompatible, or you've used a movie format that is compatible with the software on your laptop, but is not universally compatible. So stuff like MPEG-4, which today, or MP4, is now universally compatible both with Macs and with PCs, is probably the best format. When you transfer your files to the conference preview room, check, make sure they're running. If they're running there, they will probably run on the dais also. So try and embed movies inside the PowerPoint. Don't put them as a hyperlink. They must be in the same folder. Embed them and run them, and use a format which is universally acceptable. Things like graphs, tables, diagrams, they're all useful. I'll show you some examples of what you should do with them. So if you have tables, you have two ways of putting in tables. One is tables you create yourself, and the second is tables you take which are already published. If you're creating tables yourself, make sure they are large font, easily readable. If you have to reproduce a table from a text, that's fine, but then highlight what you wish to show so that people can take their attention directly to where you need to take them, and they don't waste their time elsewhere. Figures and images are extremely useful, particularly to explain diagrams. So I gave you the example of fish. I'm not going to explain fish here, but if you just had one slide with this fish diagram and spent 1 minute on it, I guarantee at least 70% of people in the hall would then understand what fish is all about. Figures, again, just because they have been published in a good journal doesn't mean that they're easy to present on a slide. Now, this has been taken from a very good journal. If I was reading the journal, I would know what I'm talking about because there is a key given at the bottom. But when I'm projecting it in a conference, nobody has the time to read those small things at the bottom. So I can make this easier for the audience to read, even though it's been taken from a journal. Theoretically, it's a good diagram. But I can always enhance it to make it easier for my audience to understand. The next little bit is about pictures. Now, just because I wanted to put in 3 pictures of a patient who's undergone a PCNL, pre-op, post-op, IVP, and I can't fit it in, I've squeezed it, and I've suddenly converted a normal man into a Klinefelter syndrome. That's not a way to handle images. If you want to show 3 images, crop them. Put them into a proper dimension, put them one on top of each other, whatever you wish to do. Don't distort those pictures. Similarly, a good picture, I want to show pheochromocytoma. I've got an arrow, but the arrow may not be easy to pick up, and therefore making a small highlight on it sometimes makes life easier for your audience. This is one slide about web presentations if you're doing online presentations. Now, this is not relevant to our UCCon, but it's anyway something good to know. I've only got one slide for this. Remember, web presentations are often viewed on a handheld device. For example, many of you might be watching this on a phone. Therefore, putting in a lot of text on such presentations is not a good idea. And using a lot more of pictorial presentations is better. But then you have to know what to speak. You have to be a better speaker, a more experienced person to be able to use a picture-only presentation. But they are fantastic presentations if you are capable of doing them. So this is the last slide. In order to be able to present well, you obviously have to prepare well. If you aren't prepared, you're just getting up in the middle of the night and doing it, it's not going to be good. You have to be able to present well, and Dr. Gyanendra Sharma will talk to you about how to make a good presentation. But you can't bluff your way out of lack of knowledge. You can be a brilliant presenter, but if you don't know your content, or if you have no content, you will lose your audience, particularly in a scientific meeting. It is very important to be understood. Just rattling off an experiment, a beautifully done research, a beautifully done randomized trial, which nobody has understood, is a waste. You're not going to win any prizes. You may have done the best research, but you're getting no prizes if you can't get your message across. So you must be understood. You must be able to keep it simple for the least well-read person in your audience. Thank you very much once again for the opportunity, and I hope I'll be able to answer the rest of the questions that you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Rajiv. I think he laid stress on 2 important things, content and delivery. And I think in between he mentioned about how to organize your thoughts and put into a good slide presentation. I think residents and other USA members who have opportunity would have learned quite a lot and probably have a good amount of time to fine tune their slides, taking a message from what Dr. Rajiv has mentioned. We move on to now the next talk, which is by Dr. Gyanendra. I think his talk is on presentation and communication skills, which is very important. And I'll invite Dr. Gyanendra to please take over.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. At the outset, I would like to thank USI ISU President Dr. Sabnis, Secretary Dr. Keshav Murthy, and Chairman of ISU Dr. Arun Chawla for giving me an opportunity to speak on a topic which is very important in conferences. How do you communicate with the conference? Though communication is supposed to be very simple, but it can be difficult. And we can never put it across the audience sometimes in simple words. And this is what I intend to present to the audience today. Now, if you look at what does communication mean, it is derived from the Latin word communis, which means you have to share, exchange, transmit, or relate to a particular subject. The dictionary meaning is that it is a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through what is written or projected. And in a conference, we have our PPT, which we are projecting. But unfortunately, very often, especially the newer persons who are presenting in the conferences for the first time, tend to equate information, imparting information with communication. Well, information is something which is giving out. And when you are communicating that information, you are getting through your message to the audience. And this is the difference between giving information and communicating. We need to remember that we are all students of science, and the cornerstone of science is the ability to communicate. And the cornerstone of communication is the ability to connect with your audience. There are 7 C's of communication. Most of the books or articles on communication would emphasize on these aspects, and most of us are aware of these common C's. But how do we implement it when we are presenting it in a conference? And there can be a variety of presentation. It could be a paper which is being presented over 7 to 8 minutes. It could be a poster over 3 minutes, or it could be a talk over 15 to 20 minutes in a part of a symposium. So we need to understand that a communication can be what we are saying, how we are saying, which is a non-verbal form of communication, and what is being written and projected on the slides. And all these 3 types of communication do matter when you want to get your ideas, thought processes, and talk across to the audience. So the question which any junior would like to ask is, how do we communicate effectively when one is making a presentation? Well, the answer to this is very simple. You present, which means plan from the start, reduce the amount of text to the minimum, as Dr. Rajiv has already said, clarify, elucidate, clarify what you want to say, summarize key results and messages, effectively deliver your message across to the audience. If there are any shortcomings in your research, mention those shortcomings. And as Dr. Rajiv has mentioned, it should be a timely talk. Planning is something which is most important. And according to me, for an effective communication, the planning should be pre-conference, pre-session, and before your talk. Now, a pre-conference planning is how you prepare your presentation, and Dr. Rajiv has really summarized it brilliantly. We need to know why we are presenting or giving a talk, and we also need to understand the audience to which we are going to present, and we need to organize our message into as short sentences, words, and slides as possible. And very importantly, we need to read extensively about that topic so that we have the confidence when we are standing in front of more than 500 people and presenting our research. Few hallmarks which Dr. Rajiv has already emphasized. Keep it simple, make it simple, and let the person with the least amount of knowledge understand what the talk is all about. A lot of people believe that for effective communication, you need to have brilliant English. In fact, it is better if we end up using the language where we are most comfortable. Keep it simple, no complex languages. If the words are so difficult that most of the audience is unable to understand and decipher its meaning, your message will never go across to them. Do not try to overload the information. Be on the point. Try to speak, get across your message in as few words as possible, and that would probably have a greater impact. And this is what I would recommend to most of the juniors who are making their presentations in the initial stages of their career. RRR. Rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. Time your presentation. Talk in front of your colleagues, your seniors. Encourage them to ask questions. And another trick that you can do is present in front of your colleagues who are from a different department, and whether you can get across your message to those people. This means that you have simplified it to that extent that anybody would understand your talk. Now, after the pre-conference planning comes the pre-session planning. Few important things which I feel are important but not emphasized in most of the places is: do not have a heavy meal before a talk. Never have aerated drinks. Always check your slides and movies whether they are running. And before your session, enter the room. Look at how the temperature is, what is the position of the podium, how is the laptop situated, where is the position of the mic, how are the videos running, what is the mechanism in which you are going to change the slides. And if you want a pointer, is a pointer available over there? It's no point trying to fumble after you have arrived on the podium. These things need to be checked out prior to your talk. Now, pre-talk planning. So once the session starts and your name is announced, be relaxed. If you have read a lot, you have rehearsed a lot, I am sure each one of you would be doing a great job presenting, and get to the podium while you are being introduced so that the time is not wasted. And this is also the time where the non-verbal communication comes in, and the people are watching you, and your small little gestures will make a big impact in getting the attention of the audience. Everybody knows that actions speak louder than words, and we need to understand it consciously also. For this, few important tips I would suggest is be relaxed, because automatically, somehow subconsciously, that gets conveyed to the audience also. Be confident, have a comfortable stance, and very importantly, look at the audience when you are making your introductory remarks so that you catch the attention of the audience. Now, a lot of people believe that it's the talk which is most important. And this particular statement might surprise all these people, that 93% of the communication tends to occur through non-verbal behavior and tone, and only 7% of communication takes place through the use of words. But if this 7% is not perfect, then this 93% will not be of any use. So you have made all the efforts for a good talk, and it's now your verbal delivery which is now taking the center stage. And for this communication, I would suggest that you follow SPAM. It's not the correct form of communication, but here the SPAM stands for the situation, the purpose for which you are presenting, the audience, and the method, both verbal and non-verbal. And take my word that even though you are standing behind a podium, you have the lights on you, you are getting projected on the screen, and your small little gestures do make an impact in getting your message across to the audience. Importantly, don't try to imitate any speaker. Dr. Rajiv is a brilliant speaker. Not everybody can have the same style of speaking. Every person has his own personality, his own way of talking, and he should stick to that. And probably that would help him in getting the ideas across to the people. For effective delivery, tend to use short sentences, slow down your talk, and use voice modulation because it gives a great impact. If you listen to the great orators, all of them tend to use these three things. Do not look at slide projection. Do not bury your head into the laptop and just keep on reading or try to read the notes that you have written or at the end of the PowerPoint. Rehearse well so that you know what you are talking and delivering to the audience. Maintain eye contact. It helps a great deal. Look at right at the beginning of the talk, look at every quadrant of the room and especially try to focus on the audience which is farthest away from you at each corner of the room, and then keep on shifting your gaze as you are delivering your talk. Importantly, even if something goes wrong, for example, the power has failed, some slide is not moving, do not panic. This is not your fault. There are people who are going to be there by your side who will take care of these things. Importantly, when you have put in all these efforts, enjoy your talk. Aim is get your message across to the audience by connecting with them and not try to impress yourself or only the chairpersons. And at the end of your talk, when the question answer sessions comes, be very polite. If there are any shortcomings or you do not know something, there is no shame in acknowledging the fact that you do not know that. Answer the questions very politely. This makes a big impact on the audience. I think I need not emphasize this because Dr. Rajiv has already mentioned that time management is important. Remember the old Mexican proverb, one timely shout is better than constant talk. So when you are rehearsing your speech, if it's a talk of 8 minutes, try to finish it within 7 minutes because some amount of time will be lost when you are presenting it on the podium. So to conclude, remember that there are 4 basic aims of a good presentation. First and foremost, connect with the audience, be open with your audience, be passionate about your topic, and listen to messages from the audience, which are very often guide to how you are progressing in your talk. As Dr. Rajiv mentioned, put yourself in the place of the audience and expect what you would want from this talk. And trust me, you would end up giving a brilliant talk. Communication is not about speaking what we think. Communication is about ensuring others hear what we intend to speak. Good communication, even after a very good lunch, can be as stimulating as a black coffee. And when you give a good talk, you would be probably what is seen on the left-hand side rather than what you are seeing on the right-hand side of your screen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ganendra. Excellent presentation. I think your points on communication regarding clarity, the cohesiveness, the completeness, conciseness, and especially the connect that are the salient feature of your presentation. I think much to gain from your talk. And I totally agree with you that when you mentioned that Dr. Rajiv is a very powerful speaker, I totally agree. But one thing, if in terms of communication, I found a very powerful communicator in Dr. Lakshan Prabhu. I just saw him on this. Dr. Lakshman, do you have any comment to add from your end?
I think let us listen to the speakers. If time permits, I will come back at them.
Okay,
Let's listen to this. They're doing a great job. Thank you very much.
Okay. We thank you, Dr. Ganendra. We end with this session. Now we move on to the next session. Arvind, are you joined?
Yes,
Arvind?
sir, I'm there. Yes.
Okay. So we will move on to the next session. I think we have some sessions in different conferences, zonal, national, where you have a quiz session and the role of a good quizmaster becomes very important to have understanding of how a quizmaster should be, how effective a quizmaster should be. Let us listen to Dr. Arvind, who will be talking about how to be a good quizmaster. Over to you, Arvind.
Thank you, sir. Hosting a session as quizmaster, and this is a quiz is generally a part of every national conference, though a very selected few people actually are the quiz masters. I'll just go through what we feel is the salient points. That why a quiz in a conference or a workshop, there are different type of quizzes. There are quizzes for competition. There are quizzes where you actually test whether the participants have actually acquired the skills and the knowledge they intended to acquire. So there can be pre-test and post-test quizzes. But the most important thing why we should have a quiz and why quizzes are around is quizzes are fun. And they also enable us to identify and they take ownership of our knowledge gaps. And when we actually do appear in a quiz, it helps us to plug some of those gaps as well. And sometimes there are competitions when you have to rank people for a particular prize session or for a particular fellowship, it can help. And if quizzes, if properly done and if they are followed up, they can actually temporarily help us to identify the progress of a particular student. So before any quiz, it is the duty of the quiz master, of course, to study this subject. We can't host a quiz without having knowledge of that subject. And we need to have a solid understanding of what the subject is and what it encompasses, including the current events, the new events, and the new research in that particular subject. And when we do a quiz, after we have finished the quiz, it's framing the answers. It is very important that we test these questions on a small group of people, maybe your friends or maybe or the type of people who are going to be appearing in that quiz. We need to know their difficulty level and whether these questions are unambiguous. They have to be clear, they have to be easy to understand, and there should be no confusion on that particular day. One important thing is always be willing and happy to take help of a friend, because on that particular day, something here, some problem, I think. The screen sharing is paused. I did not pause, definitely. Okay, on that particular day, you will have more than one work. It's important that you have a friend who will help you or distribute the papers or help you in the actual organization on that day. Finally, pre-quiz, keep the answers ready. If there's going to be a written quiz, have a key ready so this key can be distributed to people to help them and to help you mark it very quickly. On that day for the quiz, set the tone very quickly. Begin the session by introducing yourself and then explain the format of the quiz. This is the most important 5-10 minutes you will take on that day. Explain the type of questions, how many questions will be asked, how we are going to score the answers, and if there are going to be any negative marks. And finally, be clear on when the results are going to be out. So everyone has a clear idea of what they're expecting when they go into that quiz. The quiz itself, it's very important that on the topic be very focused. And the quiz has to be very focused. The questions have to be relevant. They have to be appropriate. And you can always make the questions a sort of a mix and match to make it more interactive. You can have single answer questions. You may have multiple choice questions. You can have true and false questions if it's a written quiz. You can have pathology slides. You can have videos, images to make it more interesting. Because a single type of question can become very monotonous. Keep the pace brisk. Don't try to linger on any one question. Don't drag a question too long. And when you're actually on a verbal quiz, make it fast. Move quickly throughout a quiz and make sure that all your answers and all your statements are clearly understood by your audience. And when we're on a verbal quiz, it's very important to keep the participants engaged and keep them focused. You can have timer sessions to add a little bit of excitement sometimes. And when you're having audience sessions for the audience quiz, it may be a good idea to have a sort of a button distributed to the audience so they can actually have a, they know exactly, they can participate in a much better way. Finally, you have to be flexible. Be prepared to answer questions from the participants, and if needed, adjust the questions, adjust the quiz slightly, tweak it slightly to make it even more interesting. And once we are finished with the questions, please be prepared to explain all the answers. Discuss the answers at the end of the session and explain your reasons why these answers are what they are. And if there are other options, be prepared to discuss them as well. So this is where you need an in-depth knowledge about the topics. If possible, have references ready. If somebody does have a doubt, you have a reference to back up your answer. Finally, encourage participation post-quiz. Make sure that the participants who actually were at the quiz, they can now ask answers, they can make their doubts simplified and their doubts answered before they actually leave the hall. At the end, it is very important that you thank the participants, you thank the organizers who have given you the opportunity, and the people who have helped you. Reward the winners. This is important. Again, you need to reward the winners. You need to congratulate the winners and to reward them. Sometimes the society takes up the responsibility, in which case it's fine. So I like to conclude. You must follow up. Once you are a quiz master, please follow up, send a thank you note or email to all the participants if possible. Invite them to participate in future quizzes or in urology-related events. Take the feedback of the participants, incorporate it to your next session to make that even better. And when you are a quiz master, make sure it's not just about asking the questions, but also engaging with the audience, and you make it more interactive and more fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Arvind. I think very clear that a good quiz master, you need to have a very good reflexes, a quick thinker, and very, very flexible. And I think a quiz master can convert this half an hour or 1 hour of fun event into a good education session also. Thank you very much, Arvind, for a very nice talk. And
thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, we move on to the talk by Dr. Nitin Kekre on how to chair a scientific session. Again, Dr. Nitin, as Chairman of Indian Journal of Urology, along with Dr. Rajiv, has conducted many sessions on this theme in annual conferences and the journal conference. It will be very interesting to listen to him and see what messages we get from his talk. Over to you, Dr. Nitin.
Thank you very much. Can you see my slides?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So I think most of us would have listened to the previous speakers, and if we follow what they've said, I think the role of chairperson would be very easy. Because if all the things are followed, it will be a great session, and a chairperson will have to do very minimum things. But in the real world, this does not happen. And when a scientific committee entrusts you as a chairman, they expect certain things from you regarding the successful meeting. So the first important, why is the slide not changing? So the most important thing to remember is that when you begin the session, it is important that you make sure that the audience and both speakers are made to be easy. You introduce yourself. If you have a colleague co-chairperson, introduce the co-colleague chairperson, discuss with him how both of you are going to conduct the session, and make sure that the audience are instructed in a manner that the session goes well. It is extremely important not only to switch off your cell phone, but also to make sure that the audience switch off their cell phones, and we remain and try and make that the session is not distracted. So that is the most important responsibility when you begin the session, so that the session can go well. Whenever you get an invitation to chair a session, it would probably mean that you have been recognized by the society as a person, you have made an impact, and they ask you to chair a session. And it is so important that you keep that responsibility in mind. So whatever topics or the session you are going to do, you must be well prepared with it. In case you have been asked sometimes to chair a session about which you are not very sure, you are not happy, be polite and refuse and say, I'm not very comfortable. Like, for example, tomorrow somebody asked me to session on andrology.
I mean, I haven't been really following it to a great detail, and I will be completely out of place. So it's quite okay to tell the secretary or whoever is saying, I'm not comfortable. I would rather be comfortable in these areas, so that when you actually chair a session, you are confident about that you will be able to carry the whole topic in a much better way. So whenever at the beginning, suppose there is a theme, there is a stricture urethra or a RIRS, introduce the session saying you have got lovely papers on this topic and we'll all be interested, and please participate, ask relevant questions, so that the session comes into focus and that kind of a theme can be followed. So you have a kind of make a structure in your mind the way you are going to conduct this particular session. Similarly, the most important responsibility which the society or the organizers want from the chairperson is time, because they have to put so much program in such a short period of time. So it's extremely important to make sure that you instruct each speakers at the beginning what their time is, and they will have to finish, and be clear that they will never be allowed to go beyond the time, because it disturbs everything. The whole program can get disturbed. Of course, nowadays you also have automatic things which switch off the mic, but otherwise still it becomes a problem. So it is extremely important that it is a responsibility of the chairperson to start on time and finish on time, so that the conference organizers do not get into trouble. It is very, very important on this particular issue to be absolutely strict. It is quite common, I have seen many times, that people are chairing a session, there is either a guest speaker and he goes on rambling, his time was 10 minutes, he's already finished 10 minutes and he's not even done half through his slides. So you know that if this particular person, however he may be a guest speaker, allowed to continue with his talk, he will finish off half the time of the whole program. So it is important that you need to interrupt. Don't worry about it. You interrupt very politely and say, you already finished this much time. Could you conclude in next half a minute? That it is so important to do that. When there are, you will find in any conferences, there are people who will always get up and ask questions. There are some people who are chronic question askers, and not many of them have always a relevant point to make. So we all know them. But it's very important that if somebody is asking irrelevant questions or making a point of view which he believes is right, you need to interfere. You need to intervene and make sure that that stops. You cannot allow the speaker to be harassed by the audience. So it is very, very important to be sure that who is asking questions. Please make a note that who got first, who raised his hand first, so that it is done in order and not necessarily in the order of the seniority of the person. Because even a junior most person who got up first must get his chance to ask questions. And of course, the time remains relevant, that you should not allow unnecessary thing to borrow. Similar question repeated in another way, you must intervene and say, this has already been answered, or you say, if you have more questions, please ask the speaker whenever you have a free time. So it is important to maintain that decorum all the time. Now, there are certain things which chairperson can do, which will help the speakers. It is very, very important to come to the room before the session, make yourself, understand who is going to do what, who is the person who is holding the audio visual, so that in case there is any issue, you can immediately solve the problem. It is important that most of the time you should know where to get a help. It's not uncommon to see many times a film getting stuck. As Rajiv mentioned, that despite of all the instruction, despite of following everything, sometimes the films don't run. So you need to know, or rather go first, make sure you run the presentations and say, is the film running? Is there any video in the talk? It is running. So if you made that run before, it is very unlikely that will not run later. So it is important that you must address the concerns of the speaker before itself the session can begin. Despite of all the planning, everything around, unexpected things will happen in the meeting. The speaker is not there. If it is a paper, you can move out to the next, no problem. But sometimes somebody stops, then it becomes a very difficult. Sometimes the speaker is talking on a topic and the audience are getting bored because they cannot understand. It is important that you take control of the situation, tell the speaker some relevant instructions so that he can come back onto the topic in a better way, and so that the audience need not get completely distracted. And it is important to pay attention to all this, and then decide that, if there are any distractors or anything, should you ignore them or should you intervene? And that's your judgment call that day, which you must take. When the session gets finished, you need to number one, not thank the speakers, the audience, the organizers, and before that, summarize the session, the key messages, what Dr. Arun Chawla was doing just now, that he was giving the key messages from the speaker's talk, so that it again gets re-emphasized, so that this session, this particular point was important, and this must be remembered as a take-home message. So that's an important thing to do. And of course, one of the most important thing is go to washroom first, especially if you are reaching my age or you are nervous. It is important that you emptied your bladder, so that, because you are the only person who can't leave the session. And the last but not the least, if you want to do better again and again, learn from your own experience. You usually ask your senior colleagues or even a junior person saying, how did the session go? Did I do well as a chairperson? What were my shortcomings? So that feedback from somebody, that these are the things which and you already know in the audience who are the people who listen to the talks well, who have a very constructive opinion to give to you. So make sure you go to them and say, please tell me, so that next time I can improve. So all of us learn from our previous experiences, from our previous mistakes, and that's what we do. So that the ultimate aim is that we conduct the session, the scientific session, in a meaningful way, in a disciplined way, and at the end of the day, everybody, speakers, the audience, and you yourself, learn from the session. I again take this opportunity to thank the Urological Society of India and Dr. Chawla for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So we can easily conclude from Dr. Nitin how tough a role is of a chairperson. He's some sort of a bridge between the organizer who have scripted the program, and on the other hand, the participants who have the limited time to go on the stage to present their work. But what I know is the chairperson like Dr. Nitin, Dr. Rajiv, and maybe there's something can be more impactful than the presenter actually who are presenting on the stage. So the chairperson can be much more impactful than the actual presenters because they have much more to convey from their beginning of the session, the end of the session, with their carry home message. That's what I know. That's what I have learned from Dr. Nitin and other people being as a chairperson. Thank you, Dr. Nitin, for a very excellent presentation. I think there is a time to take questions, and I have Dr. Lakshman, Dr. Keshav, Dr. Sabnis here. I just request them to unmute and just say a few words, and then we'll open the chat box and have questions. Dr. Lakshman?
Yeah, thank you. I think we all learned that the first A is never take the audience for granted. And then we were told that brevity and keeping it simple, and then communicate very well and keep the sessions dynamic. This is what I got from all the speakers, and I have benefited immensely. Thank you once again, teachers, all four of you. And thanks for this opportunity, Dr. Arun Chawla.
Dr. Keshav?
Yeah. Let me thank all the faculty who put in a lot of effort to do this presentation. I hope all of them who have joined in have immensely benefited with it. My plea is that I have sent to all the chairpersons for that session. The abstracts is only for the purpose which Dr. Nitin told, is to read up what session you are chairing and go through those abstracts so that you will be well prepared. And once you have come well prepared, you know how you can moderate that session. So thank you all of you for this wonderful session we had. I hope all of them have benefited with it. Over to you, Chawla.
Dr. Sabnis, you have anything to?
No, I think I will echo the same things. We don't have to repeat everything again and again. But I will certainly agree with Dr. Rajiv Kumar. What he said is that first half a minute is very, very important. We had a similar type of a session in one of the conference, I think at Indore, where John Fitzpatrick presented, and he conducted a session on presenting as an is it an art? And there also he mentioned that if you don't catch the audience in first half a minute, audience will definitely go away and have a tea outside. So that is very, very important. So you have to dramatize and you have to ensure that that first half an hour is very, very important. We say in emergency that golden hour, that ambulances and all that first hour is important. Similarly, that first half a minute is important. People who are actually trying to go outside, if they listen to that in first half a minute, they will not go out, but they will sit. Array, what is this? Is something very interesting. Let us sit and let us this. And rest of the points, I think they have made it very clear. I think Nitin Kenkre very rightly pointed out nowadays the chairpersons, they are considered as filling the gaps. If somebody is not there, whoever is there in the audience, just make them chairperson and let them conduct session. But that's not right. I think there is what is mentioned is that very, very important that you have a lot of responsibilities, and that is what is meant by a good chairperson. So I think they have done it very well. And these are the sessions which should be told, which should be conducted every now and then. I'm sure this will be in archives so that people at least will keep seeing this, because all the points are very, very relevant. Thank you very much for that very nice session.
Thank you, sir. Before
Before we conclude, there are a couple of questions in the chat box.
Yeah, I'm coming to that. Before I take the question in the chat box, one question to you, Dr. Ajit. I have seen a few presentations from international speakers and all that. They'll be having a one or two lines, but their thoughts will be in some sort of images or graphics. From where do they get these contents from?
Yeah, very good question, Dr. Chawla. That's become a important trend, and it's some trend that we've seen in the last 5 to 7 years. The slides that I showed about following templates, a color pattern, that is progressively going away, particularly when you're looking at speakers who are experienced. And most people are now looking at pictorial presentations, and that's exactly what Dr. Sabnis said and what I mentioned initially. You have to seek attention, you have to grab attention. If you're monotonous, you lose audience. So that is why it's very different for paper presentations by residents and young faculty, where the format that I showed should be followed. But when you're an invited experienced speaker, a lot more pictorial content. And where do you get the pictures from? You get pictures from Google. It's very simple. You go to Google Images, you put in your thought, and you will find something relevant to what you wish to find. You then have to see whether the images are copyright or not. Even if the images are copyright, if you're only using it to put your point across in a presentation and you cite the source and you put a disclaimer, you're allowed to use them purely for a lecture or a talk. So you would notice the last slide of my talk had a line at the bottom below the thank you, that some of the images in this slide have been taken from copyright sources and should not be reused or redistributed. So as long as you put up that disclaimer and you don't distribute, you can use those images.
Thank you, Dr. Ajit. Now I'll just go to the chat box and take questions one by one. The first question is from Javed. In presentation of clinical studies and trials, how much importance and depth should be how much in depth should statistical analysis be addressed? Should we just mention the name of the test implied or go a little more depth? Question to you.
So I answered this on the chat box and I'll explain this again. Most people don't understand statistics. Let's be very clear. Don't try to use your 7 minutes to explain statistics to your audience. You will not be able to do it. So unless your entire paper is about statistics, or there is something so unique about the statistics that you have done that you have to explain it. Otherwise, don't waste time on explaining statistics. Just state what test has been done. And if the audience doesn't understand, that's okay. Most of them won't understand. So explain statistics only if it is central to what you are doing or it is unique. Otherwise, just mention the test. That's enough.
Thank you, Dr. Ajit. This question from Dr. Joseph and is addressed to Dr. Nitin. Dr. Nitin, if somebody senior person or senior faculty member is there and delivering at exceeding time, how as a chairperson, if you're a junior, can just convey the message to quickly end? And number two, how different is sharing a prize paper session or any prize session?
I think there are differences in each session, and most of the societies will tell you the guidelines. For example, I'll answer the second question first. Then, when there is a prize session, usually you will have to tell the audience that this is a prize session. So no comments, no appreciation or harassment kind of a comments are allowed. Comments are not allowed. You have a question, ask the question, but do not go and give your opinion saying, oh, I have done this and this is useless. Oh, you have done a wonderful thing. That's not allowed. The prize session means that the judges are judging it. There's a content and a presentation. So please, anybody who makes a comment, you have to say, you can't make that comment, and you'll have to instruct the judges saying, please ignore that. So it is very, very important. The prize session, these things, that thing is alone very, very important. The first question which was asked was about the senior person. I personally believe that when you are chairing a session, you are the boss. No senior, no junior. The society or the organizers have entrusted you a responsibility to finish that session in that time, because the next session is. So as I said, you have to politely interrupt and say, sir, please, your time is, you are only 1 minute left. Could you please conclude? So it is, it is important to give that warning. It does not matter. You are not, it's like ask Rajiv, or me when we do the job of an editor. What do? If a senior person sends his paper to you, does that mean that I accept it? I would very politely tell him, it has happened to me. I was given a manuscript in hand saying, publish it. So I had to politely return the manuscript and say, sir, we have a process of submission of the manuscript. Please submit it online. It will go through the peer review process. And if found, people got upset, but doesn't matter. As the job of an editor, you have to do that. Similarly, as the job of a chairperson, your job is to conduct the session properly within a time. It does not matter whether it's an international speaker, whether it's a senior person or a junior person.
Thank you, Dr. Nitin. There's a question from Surya Prakash, and that is to Dr. Rajiv. Do you need to put there's a no disclosure from ISIT at the end of the presentation, or is only for selected sort of talks or presentation?
Yeah. So you see, if you've got pictures or tables from, if you've got, let's say, table or figures from a published paper, and if you've cited the paper, you don't need a disclosure. And by disclosure, I mean disclaimer, not disclosure, two different things. Disclosure is where you disclose conflicts of interest. That should actually be a standard. We haven't done it here. We don't do it very commonly, but that is disclosure of conflicts of interest. That is different. Disclaimer that I have put at the end is specifically when I've taken certain images, particularly from the net, where I'm not very sure that they were free to use or not. Therefore, I've put a disclaimer that don't copy and distribute my slides to everybody thinking that it's free to use. But if you've used tables or images from a published paper and you've fully cited that paper, a disclaimer is not essential.
Thank you, Dr. Rajiv. I think there's no more question in the chat box.
I have one more question to
posters.
Dr. Rajiv.
Yeah.
Nowadays, there is a trend. A lot of people I see, especially the youngsters, they put a lot of movie clips, the cutting of a movie clip, some dialogues and something, just to make it very impressive and something this. So what is your advice to them? In the 7 minutes present, they put 2-3 movie clips and they think that they have done a fantastic job.
So, I mean, this used to be one of the slides in my talk on presentation skills. It used to say, use humor in your slides only if you know how to use humor and you're one of the senior people in that hall. If everybody sitting in the hall is senior to you, don't try to crack a joke. It's always going to fall flat. The second thing I used to say is never bring in religion, never bring in sexism into any of your discussion, never bring in politics into any of your slides. Videos are very similar. If it's a video clip of a surgical procedure, which is what you're talking about or showing, that's perfectly fine.
Right.
If you're trying to make it a light moment by bringing in a video clip, to a large extent, you will lose audience. And if you are a young person, you will be looked at as somebody who is being brash and arrogant, and that would not be appreciated. So again, how you create your talk depends a lot upon the on your audience. If you're giving a talk at a CME event in the evening, where everybody's had a drink or two and you're a senior invited speaker, you have far more leeway. If you're presenting your research or your thesis at a conference, you have no leeway. So what you put in depends a lot upon where you're presenting.
Correct. Nicely put.
Thank you, Dr. Z. Dr. Z, coming back to the same sort of scenario, we have some session like point and counterpoint where the both ends use some caricatures and some funny images and all that. What is your interpretation on that? How much do you use? And Dr. Nitin, as a chairperson, what will be your role if somebody is going above the board? What you will do?
I'll start by saying that this started about 10, 12 years ago when we started having debates and people started putting in pictures of their opponents in various caricatures and fonts. It used to be okay when we started, but it's progressively become worse and the other person may not really appreciate what you're doing. So if you're debating with a very good friend, you both understand what you're showing is all, in good taste and you all appreciate each other, a picture of the opponent at some place might be okay and he understands what you're doing. To a large extent, I would avoid it. At the end of the day, we are about science. Even though we are calling it a debate, it is ultimately about science. Keeping some degree of light attitude, a little bit of frivolity is fine, but not beyond the very bare minimum. And don't try to make a mockery of the whole thing. And don't try to use personalized attacks as a way of putting your point because you have nothing better to say. At the end of the day, the debate is about science. Some degree of lightheartedness is okay, but very limited, very little.
I think as Rajiv has said, it is very, very difficult to, unless you are extremely experienced, to use humor in a scientific debate. You have to be very, very good at it to make sure that your humor actually helps the debate, but does not hurt or does not kind of demean your opponent. Many times what I have seen is that now our debates are actually less science, but more of this. So it doesn't mean, because what happens in such a situation is that the debate point which has been created actually gets lost. The science of the debate is still very important. If there is unless the society has created this debate telling you that we want to entertain people. So if the purpose is entertainment, then the movie clips, everything is absolutely fine. But I don't think today we have time for that. So that mostly hard work goes on. Ask the Keshav or anybody who's putting these programs, that a lot of hard work goes behind the screen to select topics for debate, to select topics for sessions. So they want that these are the relevant topics today where there is a controversy or the audience must get balanced view. So that is what is more important. In that theme of it is sometimes you have a light, candid kind of a humor, maybe. But I personally would not think, I never get impressed by such debates. I would rather look for a debate with a great scientific content, with occasional banter, but not that shouldn't be the kind of a primary theme which is happening today. So I think I would say that.
Okay, sir, given the same situation, you feel that the way debate is going on, the one with having more of fun and humor, you think when you have put this debate to the vote, the audience will definitely vote for him. You personally feel the opponent who had less of this sort of fun and humor has more substance. You will put this debate to vote for the audience, or you yourself will convey the decision?
No, I think the thing is, if the format of the debate, you have decided that there will be a vote at the end of it, then I think it is the vote and the audience. In a democracy, it is not necessary that always the best person would get elected. So if you have a format where you already pre-decided that would be a vote at the end of the thing, I have as a chairperson, you cannot, but as a chairperson, you can summarize it. But you should not do what I was witness to one of the very, very important debates in USI meeting at Hyderabad. I remember the topic also. The topic was vasoepidural anastomosis versus assisted reproductive techniques, and the chairperson started the session with the slides. He had his own slides. He presented about 15 slides at the beginning of the session and concluded that assisted reproductive techniques are 100% better than VEA. And they said, now let's have the debate. So, so there was hardly a need for a debate. So it is what you are saying. And another extreme example, I will give it to you. I was chairing a session on a debate where the session topic was whether you should give parasympathomimetics in an atonic bladder. And the guy who was debating for giving parasympathomimetics unfortunately quoted one of the articles which I had done for IJU, saying the chairperson is sitting here already, who has done a review of literature, and it has shown that it is useless, but I am supposed to debate it. But at the end of the session, it was put to debate, it to the vote, saying how many people, after listening to a good scientific evidence that the parasympathetic mimetics are not useful and should not be given in, say, called atonic bladders, how many people will give? You would be surprised, 70% of the audience voted for giving the drug. So that is the value of a scientific debate sometimes in our society. But I think the purpose should remain scientific. So even this will all happen, but you should stick to science is what I would say.
Thank you, sir. I think
actually, should we put a debate to vote? I think that also is very important, because both the debaters actually argue for this and for that. And
there are only some formats. There are only some formats where they are put to vote when you want to eliminate one of them to show that, but not all debates are put to vote.
Yeah, because nowadays debate people put a chairperson also, they don't know. They say, okay, let us have the audience poll and this and show of hands. So whether it is appropriate or not.
No, I think it is more important to decide at the beginning, and the society can say, if we are not putting it to the vote, so then usually you have a very diplomatic way of putting the thing, saying, oh, both have debated it very well, and
that is chairman has to conclude that way.
You give your opinion saying, or you leave it to the audience saying, I leave it to you to decide. But sometimes there is a role of at least putting a scientific content to the perspective. For example, if somebody has quoted studies which are actually not level 1 evidence, but I've been quoting from personal experiences, I think as a chairperson, you can point that out then, that the quality of evidence presented by so-and-so lacks this, or this is good, so that, the quality of evidence, you should look at it carefully. So at least you can kind of give a hint to the audience at the end of it, that though the speaker was brilliant, he has quoted a lot of studies, but none of them have that value or weight by which you can make your decision. So that is also, I think, irrelevant.
Correct.
Thank you, sir. I think with no more questions, I think the others are comments only. There's no fresh question.
There is one question, Dr. Chawla, which I think it's actually important. If you don't mind, I would like to answer
please
that.
Tell me, sir.
So there is a question about posters, and they say that we are allowed only 3 slides. The first slide has the entire poster. So what should I put on the other 2 slides? I think it's a very, very important question, because posters are our most important format of presenting. And people who are presenting posters must understand that the principal presentation is actually your poster. I'm assuming we are still printing posters, or are we only doing 3 slides now? Or are we still
we are having the e-poster display where the posters will be displayed as e-posters, and then he will have 3 slides where he can present the gist of that.
And when we are doing the display, is there a walk around to discuss? Do the chairpersons walk around and discuss all the posters in the hall?
For the best poster, yes. For the best posters.
Okay. So that means there is a hybrid here that we are doing here. There are 2 types of poster sessions. One poster session is where there is a walk around, which means the chairpersons spend about half of the entire session walking to each poster. Half of the audience walks together and they actually discuss each poster at the poster. And the second format is what Dr. Keshav is saying, which is a very common format now, that you have an e-poster that is displayed on the e-slides and you can only present 3 slides. So here on the crux of your presentation should be your results and your, 1 slide for your methods and 2nd slide for your results. The introduction part can be skipped. It's gone on to your 1st slide. There is no discussion that needs to happen. Your 2nd slide should typically be pictorial showing the methods. If you can show it in a flow chart, or if you can show it in a diagram as your methods, that should be your slide 2. 1 out of your 2 minutes should be spent only explaining your methods, and 1 out of your 2 minutes should be spent spelling out the results. And again, don't copy paste table from your full paper. Pick up the most important aspects of your results, your primary endpoint, 2 or 3 secondary endpoints, and then a summary conclusion. So your second slide should be just that. So you can do it on 3 slides, which is why the format is for 3 slides. Don't crowd it up, just limit it to a flow chart or a diagram from methods, and the key results, answering your key endpoints, and a conclusion on your third slide. Thank you.
There's a raise of hand by Dr. Sarika. Dr. Sarika, can you unmute yourself and go ahead? Dr. Sarika? There was a raise of hand, and probably there's a question too from her. I was just seeing that is, I think it was the same, how to speak in a debate. I think this is very broad. Would you like to just give a quick comment to her question, Dr. Sarika's question, how to speak in a debate?
You want me to answer?
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
I think the most important is you have to create the debate points in a manner that you first present your argument in a very constructive manner. That what are the main, when you are speaking first, you first make in your mind that what are going to be your key points of argument. It's like a lawyer, you know, how you are going to argue the case for the motion. So you have to select your best arguments. And then for those arguments, you have to first give your evidence. Then as a law, also you would think that what your opponent is going to present to dilute your audience, you dilute your argument. So you also need to have a material literature available to kind of a counter that thing which you already anticipate. I mean, you usually get 1 or 2 minutes to counter, but that's more of other thing. But basically the theme should be, you make it a point that these are my strong points of argument. This is my evidence I'm going to present. And then I also look at the points which I think will be the points against my arguments. And I also make sure that I kind of back up my talk to support my idea. So I think that is the way a debate should be structured. And you always would make a very, very emphatic points if you have a literature support, a proper literature support to make sure that you deliver your points in this particular fashion.
Thank you, Dr. Nitin. I think Dr. Sarika couldn't unmute herself, but you have answered doubts and questions. Dr. Sarika, if you have anything more clarification, you can just write us. Yeah, she has conveyed her thanks. Thank you very much, sir. With this, on behalf of Indian School of Urology, many thanks to President Dr. Sabnis, Honorary Secretary Dr. Keshav, Secretary Dr. Lakshman. I saw Dr. Pankaj also, and our secretary, Dr. Nitin, Dr. Rajiv, Dr. Gyanendra, Dr. Arvind, and all the delegates who have joined for this webinar. For you, this webinar will be there on USI YouTube by tomorrow evening. That's what I have been told. And if you are fine tuning or you want to go in again day after tomorrow, by morning, you can just repeatedly watch, or you can just use this all these talks for your making your presentation a little better. Thank you all once again, and with this we'll sign off. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Everybody, thank you.
Thank you.